Welcome back then folks to day 2 of Special Projects pack number 12, and this one is actually the only car this time around which I did the design for, and the only reason why I did it is because unsurprisingly I couldn't find anyone else that had. Now this is inspired by actually one of my legitimate favourite Peugeots. I know that most people don't have that as a sentence that they say too often, but to me the Peugeot 207 RCup concept, which kind of ended up spawning the more famous and Forza-featured 207 S2000 rally builds, that kind of thing, the wide arch kit version basically of the 207, originated as something which looked a lot like this. In fact, it was the exact same colours, same kind of vibe, and that's exactly what this is a tribute to. This is a reimagining, if you will, like an alternate timeline where instead of a 207, it's a 208. So it's running the same kind of horsepower as the 207 RCup, which is 280. The weight is slightly different. I wanted to go for a bit of a Lamborghini Sesto Elemento kind of thing, which is just under a ton, 999 kilos. And ultimately the vibe that I'm going for is not a production vehicle. I wanted it to have more of a concept car vibe. So a bit of a mix between some things which seem too overkill. You'll see in a minute when we talk about the brakes, for example. But then on the other side, some things which are more believable and more reasonable, like the tyres or the horsepower. So as far as the actual tuning goes, of course I have got the wide body on this one, and you can grab the livery by adding it via the description below, the link there. As far as the actual parts though, you don't need the silencer. I double checked and I actually didn't end up using that one because you don't need it for the horsepower level. You could go for it if you want the sound, but you don't actually need to. We've got sports pads, stage 1 weight. I've upgraded the tyres just a little bit, like I said, from comfort softs to sport hards. As far as the club sports section, we've got the high lift cams. I'll just double check. It has the high lift cams S, so bear that one in mind as we jump back. As far as the clutch and flywheel, those are sports once again. Stage 2 weight, power restrictor and ballast are fitted. For the semi-racing stuff, the low RPM turbo gives you that really nice instant zero lag kind of thump out of corners. The fully customised ECU, the fully customised diff as well. Stage 3 weight. As you can see, I've opted not to bother with the body rigidity. It gives you a slight improvement on points though. I'll leave it down to you. It's a pretty good car already through corners, so I don't personally think you need it. As far as the racing section, we've got the race filter, the race manifold. So kind of weird to have the exhaust standard, but then the other bits upgraded, but that's what I've gone for. Then the suspension is fully customised. And then, this is where I said there's a bit of a mismatch. Sometimes on a concept car, you'll see things which are almost like race spec, even though the car is kind of almost production in its approach. Which is what I've done here. So it's got the big old carbon ceramics, supercar style, but then with sports pads. So you don't necessarily have to do that. You could put it on sports discs, I guess, but I wanted it to have that kind of mismatched approach where it's some things are more exotic than others. We've got the sports, or not sports, the steering angle adapter, I should say, of course for cornering, the hydraulic handbrake as well, that's just for fun when you need it. And as far as the ultimate section, like I said, we've got the high lift cam. So 1.6, 280 horsepower, just under a ton, so in other words about 280 horsepower per ton, which is very good for a hot hatch, and 554 points, which is quite reasonable on sports tyres. So nothing too crazy in terms of the numbers. Like I said, very heavily inspired by the 207 RCup. Then, as far as the actual tuning goes, we've got the sports hards fitted, naturally. As far as the ride height, sounds pretty high, 140mm, but if you take a look at it, it doesn't look too high. Again, I didn't want it to look slammed, and I didn't want it to bottom out on the arches, so I'm pretty happy with that ride height and how it looks. We've got 4 on the anti-roll, 30 and 40 on the dampers, 2.15 for the springs, 1 degree of camber on the front, half a degree on the back. We've actually towed out on the rear, which is not uncommon for me. That's something I tend to do more on rally builds though, rather than on road builds, but being a front-wheel drive, it can come in handy. Helps you kick the tail out just a little bit. It's almost like the front-wheel drive equivalent of having four-wheel steering, if you will. So we've towed it out a little bit by 0.5, towed the front in by 0.20. For the exact same reason, much better turn-in on this one. As far as the diff, we've got 10, 50 and 50. Might not be to everyone's taste. Of course, front-wheel drives differ wildly, depending on what you've done with, well, the diff. So I'll leave it up to you. Like I said, I've left the transmission standard. That's another one of those things which I wanted to keep a bit more realistic. I wanted it to have that slightly laggy, chunkier, more realistic kind of feel. More like a road car mixed with a high-performance car. As far as the ballast, 16 kilos is what I've gone for. I've put that all the way to the back. I mean, it's still 61% over the front, but it's not bad, and it doesn't matter too much in a front-wheel drive chassis. There's no downforce to work with, and over here we've got all the bits that we've fitted. And there weren't really a huge amount of them, but naturally all that's left to do is to jump out to the track and show you what it can do in practice. Now, much like the Ferrari, and to be honest, much like the Porsche from yesterday, there seems to be a running theme here where there's really not many notes that I have in terms of using this car. It's just really fun. Being a small front-wheel drive car, far more horsepower than standard. 280 is quite a bit. It's easy to underestimate these days, especially just how much 280 horses is, especially in a small front-wheel drive chassis, but that can very easily give you chronic torque steer, chronic understeer, and just be awful to work with, even though it should be great. With this one, the turn-in is great. Obviously, with front-wheel drive, you do need to have a slightly different approach. Don't try and power its way necessarily through every single corner, but it's a lot of fun. This is one which I've had in my head to potentially do for a while. Like I said, I absolutely love the RCup concept. One of my dream real-life builds would actually be to buy something like a 207 GTI and turn it into an RCup, or like an imitation of it, not necessarily a full replica, because I think it's just such a badass looking car. Yet another occasion where Peugeot made this awesome thing and then just never actually reached the road. And of course, like I said, they did do some rally with essentially the same idea, but it's such a wasted potential kind of concept. Imagine if that had reached production, maybe in a slightly toned down form, but still that kind of thing. I mean, it could have literally been like Peugeot's equivalent of a Clio V6. That would have been awesome. So that's it for this build. One of my definitely fictionalized ones, one of the most fictional ones in this pack probably, but of course if you do decide to use it, I hope you enjoy it. It's quite a high point level for a little front wheel drive car, but it is pretty quick, so it justifies it. And naturally stick around for the other builds for the rest of the week and check out the two which I already did yesterday as well. But for now, thanks for watching.